you. I'm Della Freeth. I'm the Chief Executive of the Science Council. I took up my role in August, so I haven't met all of you yet. By the end of today, I will have. I'm really pleased that we've been able to convene this meeting with the organisations that we have partnered with. It's a really important space for speaking about the important skills issues. I'm going to invite the panelists for the first panel to join me on the stage. So what we're doing today is bringing together organisations and perspectives from across the UK science and research community to consider the effectiveness of the range of interventions and policies that we already have in place, and also what more can be done to address the UK's STEM skills gaps. So we're beginning with the plenary panel that will look at policies that are already in place before we move on to the rest of the day. So my panelists are, on my far left, Dr. Kelly Veer, MBA. She's University Director of Skills and Strategy at the University of Nottingham. Welcome, Kelly. She began her career as a junior medical technician at the University of Nottingham a little while ago. She says how long ago, but I don't really want me to say. I'll move on, shall I? And she now leads an award-winning programme to enable the strategic and professional development of the university's 700 plus technical staff across the UK and in Asia. She also leads the technician commitment, which ensures visibility, recognition, career development and sustainability for the technical community across higher education and research. In 2023, it was announced that she would lead the new £5.5 million UK Institute for Technical Skills and Strategy. So congratulations, Kelly. And sitting next to Kelly, I have Dr. Joe Marshall. He is the Chief Executive of the National Centre for Universities and Business. He was former Chief Operating Officer and Director of Strategy at NCUB, and he took over the Chief Executive role in the summer of 2018. Prior to joining the National Centre, he held a number of positions across government and university organisations. He's an academic specialising in government education policy and practice, and he's worked on with a number of international agencies, including UNESCO, WHO, and the European Parliament. A researcher at the University of Manchester, he went on to hold senior lectureship positions at Liverpool Hope and the University of Worcester before working for UK Sport in the government agency for elite sport, and then the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. It's a really interesting career. Closest to me, Debbie Johnson. Debbie is Head of Innovation, Talent and Skills at Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency. Debbie is focused on two goals. Firstly, supporting innovative businesses in accessing and developing talent to realise the UK's innovation ambition, and then ensuring that education and skills system is supported in responding to the changes created by our innovations to maximise its potential for our economy and society. Prior to joining Innovate UK in 2020, Debbie was involved in the design and implementation of collaboratively funded business-led skills programmes in the construction sector. Welcome to you, Debbie. So to begin, each of our panellists will come to the lectern here and speak for up to about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a plenary sessions with questions for all or any of the panel afterwards when we're all sitting back down at our chairs. But can I invite Debbie to come to the microphone first, please? Thank you.
I never like to assume that people know anything about Innovate UK, having never heard of Innovate UK before I applied for a job here. And then when you talk to people, we can be perceived as anything, but we are the UK's innovation agency, and as well as supporting businesses to innovate, we also make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to allow that to happen. So we have lots of things that you will hopefully have heard of. So our 50-year-long knowledge transfer programme that had some very amazing awards in Cardiff last night, the Catapult Network, and as well as that, lots of things that have resonated in what's already been spoken about today. I think it's recognised in Tom's input that talent and skills hasn't traditionally been something that people have wanted to talk about when we talk about innovation. We perceive that innovation can happen and we'll just reap the benefits within the UK. Innovate UK hadn't previously positioned innovation, talent and skills strongly in its profile until the launch of the UK Innovation Strategy in 2021. And shortly after, we published our Plan for Action, which positions innovation, talent and skills as one of our fundamental foundations. And I think in that time, a lot of work's been delivered to realise what role we can play in making sure that we complement what's already going on in the system, but also play to our strengths in terms of what our businesses are realising and what they need. So in terms of our intent published in the Plan for Action and our strategic delivery plan, we focus on a number of elements. So before the end of this year, you'll hear more about our No Limits mission, which is about making sure that we're empowering people to achieve their full potential, to welcome them into the innovation and science system and allow them to realise their potential. And we've already got, as we've mentioned, quite a few talent programmes that are really reaping benefit. As part of UKRI, we play a full role in the Future Leader Fellowship Scheme. We're delighted to see so many businesses now participating in that. What I wanted to focus on today is the two things that we're doing, which are fortunately aligned to the National Science and Technology Council's STEM mission, which is being led by the Department for Education. So particularly our Innovation Skills Framework and our Workforce Foresighting Hub. Our Innovation Skills Framework was launched earlier this year in partnership with the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. What we realised is that innovation can happen anywhere, and we should be supporting all individuals to understand how they can contribute to being a part of the innovation workforce. The Innovation Skills Framework is simply setting out what those skills associated with being innovative can look like. And I think we've heard it today, they complement the technical skills that we want to embrace within our workforce. The Innovation Skills Framework can be embedded across all learning programmes, which is one of the key benefits, and we encourage people to map what they do. So we're working closely with IFATE to now understand what that looks like across apprenticeships and higher technical qualifications, as well as with universities and private training providers, to understand what's missing from the people that we generate through our skills system. Businesses are most likely to tell us that our skills system isn't producing the individuals that they need. What we notice when we're talking about what that is, and I think we've heard it said about being able to write a sentence and speak coherently, it's about being creative, it's about being critical, it's about self-reflection. And the things that we're pulling out through the Innovation Skills Framework will just allow people to come out of the education system knowing that they can talk to future business employers about how they can respond to those skills and competencies and capabilities that businesses want to see. And as an example, how it works is that it is mapped across existing knowledge, skills and behaviours, existing learning outcomes within our skills system. So we're not looking to do anything new, we're not adding qualifications to the system, we're complementing what's going on already. So that's one piece of work that we hope will bring real benefit to people who are coming through the system as young people, as people who want to reskill and upskill and allow them to contribute to the innovation and science ambitions of the country. The second thing that we're working on, which I'm pleased to say that, again, standing on the shoulders of giants, the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, along with the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, looked into how do we support the generation of our future workforce? How do we make sure that what we're doing can create our future workforce? That was then taken on by the Department for Education in terms of the Emerging Skills Project, and since 2022, Innovate UK is part of the the goals in the innovation strategy, has taken on responsibility for the foresighting element of this skills value chain, which I'll explain in a minute, but really demonstrating that the role that Innovate UK can play is being able to articulate how innovation is going to affect the workforce, the things that we're funding, the things that we're getting behind as the innovation agency. How does that then translate into what we want the impact on the workforce to be? It's been mentioned I've come from construction. I think construction is one of those sectors that consistently publishes data about how many people we're going to need in the future and what's going to happen if we don't recruit those people. In the 20 years I was there, we never fell off a cliff. But what happened is we never produced to the time, cost and quality that we wanted to see within the UK. And the reason for that is we don't think about how we embed innovation. We don't think about how, when amazing things come into our society, how does that change how the workforce needs to do their roles? So what we're saying here and what the difference is, and which came out from the international tour led by Gatsby in the USA, was about thinking about the workforce capability at the same time as you're backing the innovation. And that's what the Foresighting Hub aims to do. Led through the Catapult network and delivered across the Catapult network, we're working with educationalists, technologists and businesses to define the impact of those innovations. What we're then doing through the partnerships that are in place is talking to the Department for Education, talking to devolved nations about how do we then embed that learning within our system to make sure that when businesses are demanding these as a norm in 2 or 3 years' time, that we've got the courses, we've got the qualifications to respond to that need. What that looks like in practice is this example in electrification. So what we've seen, and this again, this was led well before me, but what we saw through the DfE's Emerging Skills project was actually being able to think about electrification as Innovate UK was investing in it. Then thinking about what do those courses look like. We don't have to support qualifications every time. Some of these are adding on to additional qualifications, taking from other qualifications, or just short course module content. But what we can now see on reflecting on this, the benefit of hindsight, is it's been achieved. We now have the Electric Revolution Skills Hub, which is engaging with businesses and learners to deliver the course content that could only be generated by talking to those technologists at the point of realising the benefit of that innovation. I was asked to sort of say, how do you get involved? There is nothing that we do that we're doing in isolation, and we've always said we're not here because I think potentially we're coming in late to the party. We're not here to confuse or duplicate, but what we're here to do is to bring benefit. I've mentioned that we've got our No Limits mission launching later this year. We want that to be a coalition of partners, putting out all the good work we do so individuals and businesses are aware of those skills and support offers for individuals. The Workforce Foresighting Hub is looking at lots of different technologies, so commercialising quantum, dynamic cabling for offshore wind. It's everything that I don't understand, but I will try and talk about. But we will do it because I don't need to know all of that, but we are surrounded by technologists and educationalists who can. So the Workforce Foresighting Hub is definitely a call to action for your skills and expertise. And I'd probably say the No Limits platform is how we can generate the excitement behind the opportunities that we have for the future. So thank you.
I don't have slides, so I'm going to sort of riff between and sort of be the sort of thorn between two roses of sort of excellent speakers of this morning. What I want to try and do is, so the National Centre for University Business sits in this really interesting space between our leaders of universities and our leaders of businesses and looking at these kind of grand challenges. And I want to sort of reflect at the outset that the 2020s will possibly, I say with a degree of certainty, be probably one of those pivotal decades of this century. Already, and I sort of likened this earlier in the week, that this decade already can be kind of measured almost in kind of what the equivalent of sort of dog years. Every year we've had is almost sort of 7 or 8 years long. 2020 was one of those years that went on forever, and we haven't quite yet got out of that cycle. And so when we look back at the beginning of this year, just alone, you know, the advent and the impact that ChatGTP was going to have on all of our jobs, not just sort of one or two niche industries. Actually, all of our jobs were under threat. And so I want to sort of frame my comments really that some of the work that NCUB is doing is trying to take many of the kind of provocations from the Chief Scientific Advisor, many of the things that Debbie is working on at Innovate UK, and reflect that actually our world of work and the employers and businesses that we work with, in many ways, so is Debbie, are profoundly going through quite profound changes about what their customers want, about what their suppliers can provide. That brings you into the kind of cost of living, energy crisis, inflationary pressures, but it also presents issues around actually the impact of technologies. But also, if you think about as well, there's been a lot of discussion more recently about the sort of HS2 decisions by the government, but actually that plays into a much broader discussion about actually how ambitious is this government about, or future governments, about meeting our commitments to net zero and 2050 challenges. That also then presents some really interesting challenges about actually this isn't going to be for our children to deal with. For many of us, we will be still alive in 2050, one hopes, and dealing with the consequences of having or having not reached net zero by 2050. And part of that is actually about, we are now living in an aging society that, certainly Western democracies, are living for longer. And so my conversation, if you kind of take everything from kind of COVID to events more recently in Israel, where we are dealing with kind of quite big seismic events that are sort of happening, but also we are living in an era in which actually we are grappling with what does it mean to transition to a carbon neutral or carbon less dependent economy? What does it mean to live longer and potentially work longer? So those are my kind of framing comments. What I'd like to just quickly pick on, what does this then mean actually for the places of work and the places and those interactions between universities and businesses? Well, three things. The impacts are actually on what employers need from future generations. And I'm not going to sort of fall into the trap that Angela has kind of presented and say, well, actually, we need X number of X's and X number of Y's by yesterday. But I am going to say that actually when many employers will often talk about needing people who can do and what does that mean? They can do science and they can do computational. Now, you could argue that these things are not necessarily discrete, but what they need is you to bring what they need that future workforce to be able to do is really good, cutting edge or brilliant fundamental science, and the ability to code, the ability to program, the ability to understand linguistic models. These are not now divorce constructs. If we are going to tackle net zero, we need to be able to understand the science and the behavioral changes. These are different domains of activity, but actually the ability to do both. We are also going to need people who have brilliant collaboration skills. We are now talking about multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, cross-working skills. We need people who can foster, engender, develop, garner, support coalitions, build people who can build coalitions. And these aren't the skills that naturally our graduates and our technicians and our apprenticeships come out with, but actually they don't also just happen by chance. And so my provocation to many education providers when we work with universities is, how are you starting to nurture those collaboration skills through your seminars, through your work experiences, through those things? How are you exposing your students and future people of the workforce to develop those skills? Because they don't just happen. And once you are in the workplace, they will need to evolve and develop. And my final part, which then just leads me up to a couple of final comments, is we also need people who are almost from day one recognizing that they will always be in learning mode. We have just heard from our chief scientific advisor, possibly, when you look at her CV, it is a pretty impressive array of achievements, accolades, gongs, and the like. She's carrying on learning. She is learning machine learning at Stanford and doing online courses. And I think one of the really interesting things that the government has pushed in recent years and is going through Parliament, I think it's just been approved, is the lifelong loan entitlement. Part for me is not necessarily the mechanics of how that will be administered. Actually, it's about a provocation that we no longer live or work, more specifically, in careers that will be defined by carriage clocks after 40 years at the Science Council or at NPL or at GSK. Actually, you will move both between jobs, you'll move between careers, you will move between professions. And so actually your ability to lifelong, and my big provocation back to universities at the moment is, how are you equipping yourselves not to just do undergraduates and a bit of postgraduates, perhaps do an MBA? Actually, how are you helping people reskill, retrain, redevelop those skills in the future, because their careers may become obsolete, their jobs may become obsolete. So how do you help people equip them? So 2 final provocations in terms of the opportunities this presents. One, I think this is about interactions, collaborations between industry and education providers should be the norm and not the exception. There are lots of advisory groups that help and advisory panels, but actually we'd like to see much more integration of those things, and lots of the things that Innovate are doing are spearheading that work as well, but lots of other organisations are doing this. That actually this isn't a sort of tokenistic, have we consulted with business? Actually, these are collaborative models, and we really like the degree apprenticeship model, because actually it was an employer-led scheme. It brought employers what did they want rather than what universities or other providers would push out. But actually employers are not education experts. They shouldn't be, and they never intend to be. So actually they need to work collaboratively with, and if I go into my old life of education policy, pedagogically and didactically, how we train and teach and develop and learn and scaffold are really important parts and parcels of these things. And my final thing, and I'm just going to set up one of my colleagues who will be speaking on the plenaries later on, is also about scale. What we have is a lot of interventions at the moment that I think are brilliantly intended, but don't necessarily achieve the scale of change that we need to drive the economy. We've just done a fascinating piece of work looking at the movement of people between industry and academia and vice versa. One of the challenges is there's some amazing schemes, amazing fellowships that help and enable that, but it has 2 challenges as we see it. One, scale. These aren't huge schemes that are moving lots of people. An advanced knowledge economy should be driven by lots of people who can move and do research in industry and in academia and vice versa. But also, if we simply scale up our existing programs, there is a danger that these schemes privilege certain groups. They enable certain people who will probably be able to move anyway. How do we allow more people of all different types of shapes and colours and different backgrounds to be able to move seamlessly between it, and not for mobility to be just those preserve of a small and privileged group? So they're my provocations. I have been the sort of thorn between 2 roses, and I will pass to Ken.
Thank you, Joe. It's a real pleasure to be here with Debbie and Joe on the panel, but Joe, I'm quite disappointed you didn't get the memo about animal print. I do have some slides, hopefully they're loaded. I want to talk to you about technical staff, so particularly technical staff working in universities, research and innovation. So as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, global challenges are solved by teams, research teams, with a range of skills at all levels across the system. And technical staff are an absolutely vital component of those teams. But traditionally, we have lacked visibility, recognition, and career opportunities. And as a consequence, the UK has an identified shortage of technicians. On top of that, in our existing workforce, we have an ageing population with a high proportion of technicians due to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. We're not doing enough to bring a new pipeline of technical talent into higher education and research, and we have significant equality, diversity and inclusion challenges. And of course, if not addressed, this is a real threat to our government's ambitions. Quite frankly, you can't be a science and technology superpower without technical staff skills and really, wonderful careers. I'm really passionate about this because I am a technician. I thought I'd show you my first day at work. And Della, you were really kind, thank you, but this was 24 years ago, I'll own it. Often when I flash this picture up, some of you will know I say that's me in the middle, so aging well. I fell into this role at the University of Nottingham as a junior medical technician, and if I'm honest, I didn't even know these technical careers existed. As a naive 18-year-old, straight out of A-levels, I thought that universities were full of professors and students. I couldn't access higher education in the traditional way. Quite frankly, my family and I, we couldn't afford it. So I just looked for any job that would pay for me to do a degree part-time. And this is where I ended up as a junior medical technician in the Division of Immunology at the University of Nottingham. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. It was quickly very apparent to me that as technicians, we were absolutely essential to research, to innovation, to new discoveries, and really importantly, I guess, to supporting, the student experience. We're teaching and training scientists and engineers of the future. But unfortunately, I soon discovered that the culture around the technical profession wasn't always that positive. Don't get me wrong, I've been incredibly well supported at the University of Nottingham, but when you look sort of, beyond your immediate research group or department or school, to the wider institution and then the sector as a whole, it was very Downton Abbey. It felt like technicians were downstairs and our academic colleagues were upstairs. So why would anyone aspire to these roles? When I talk about technicians in higher education and research, I mean at all levels of the system. So from junior medical technicians, for example, like me, all the way up to my colleagues who have pathways now to professorial equivalents. In fact, we've just had a technical specialist at Newcastle University be made a professor of practice, the first sort of technical colleague of mine to be given that recognition. It's a really, really exciting career, but we absolutely need to give it more attention and attract more people into this profession. And since 2017, we've been working to change this. The Science Council and the Gatsby Foundation launched the Technician Commitment in 2017. It's a very simple initiative with 4 key pillars. We invite universities and research institutes to sign the Technician Commitment. And by doing so, they are pledging to advance visibility for their technical staff, recognition, career development opportunities, but also to think about the sustainability of technical skills within their institution. Because as a sector, we have really lacked strategic insight and foresighting actually around the technical skills we need to drive research and innovation. I've got a very short film. I'm hoping it will work. It's only about 90 seconds, but it's just to convey some of the progress and impact that we've seen in from the Technician Commitment over the last 6 or 7 years. So hopefully, Ryan, it's going to work, yeah? No? Oh, but there's no sound. Maybe can you fix the sound at the back? Or do you want me to just keep going? There we go. Thank you. Quite dramatic, isn't it? I said to the filmmaker, I want it to look like a film trailer, and I think they've succeeded. What the Technician Commitment has done is really create an environment where we're talking about the challenges that face the technical community across the 4. And so what we've been able to do is apply for funding to really invest in strategic understanding of the technical workforce and design interventions to really support technical staff across the country. And in 2020, we were awarded £4.9 million from Research England for a transformation programme called Talent. Talent has multiple work streams, but I just want to focus on a key one, the Talent Commission. This was a piece of work, there we go, where we pulled together a group of commissioners nationally. And as you can see here, we had vice chancellors, we had representatives from funders, we had representatives from professional bodies, learner societies, and technicians themselves. And these colleagues worked together for over 20 months to really try and address that lack of strategic understanding that we have as a sector about our technical workforce. The end result was the Talent Commission report. It looks like a PhD thesis, actually, because there was so much to say. The Talent Commission was launched initially in February 22 online because of the pandemic. We were in lockdown at the time, but we were able to have a formal launch at the House of Lords in May 2022. And the reception has been really, really fantastic. The Commission makes 16 overarching recommendations to the sector, to different sector stakeholders. And it's been wonderful to see different organisations really grab hold of those recommendations and begin to enact them. The worst thing that could have happened for us would be that this Commission report and all the work that went into it ended up as a dusty report on someone's shelf, but so far the signs are really good. The 16th recommendation of the Commission was that there should be this new national entity, a very collaborative entity, called the UK Institute for Technical Skills and Strategy. Originally, that was a working title, but as you can probably guess, we couldn't think of anything better. And in August, just this year, the Institute for Technical Skills and Strategy went live. Our vision is to ensure that the UK can be a global leader in science, engineering, and also the creative industries, which is really important, actually. But that's enabled by its technical capability and capacity. And of course, also, we really want to ensure that technical careers are developed, invested in, and ultimately aspired to. We want to accelerate and fulfil the potential of UK technical skills and careers across higher education, research, and innovation. And there's a number of ways that we plan to do that. ITSS, as we call it, is a really collaborative approach, and you can see some of the logos there of some of our partner organisations, many of which are represented in the room today. We're really excited about the collaborative approach we can take to really address some key issues facing the technical community. We have 4 key themes of activity. They all begin with I, so they're really helpfully useful to remember. Insight is about building on that foundational work of the Talent Commission to really ensure that we have increased research and understanding of technical skills, roles and careers across the sector. Influence is about how we continue to advocate and inform policy in the space pertaining to technical skills, education and careers. Innovation is about developing some really innovative interventions to really support technical staff across the country. And integration is about how we embed all of that good practice and I guess make it business as usual moving forward. I'm going to pause there, but thank you for the opportunity to talk about technical skills, recognising that this isn't all about PhD qualifications plus, and that technical skills are a vital part of our science workforce. Thank you.
There might be questions around there. So we should be picking up from the audio enhancement. Can I just check? Are we audible? Am I audible? Yeah, okay, yes. So we're fine. Thank you. So we can talk normally. It's strange when you don't have a microphone in front of you. Thank you so much to the panelists. Lots of thought-provoking ideas. I'll take chair's privilege and ask the first question, if that's okay, and then ask for others. As you were talking about the workforce and the pipeline, one of the things I've always felt about the future workforce is that most of the future workforce actually is the current workforce at the moment, because we trickle people into the workforce and trickle people out, and it's been pointed out that people are going to work much, much longer. But we live in an ageist society, so I hear that people are too young to be considered for things, I hear that people are too old to be considered for things. What do we do around the things that we're trying to achieve with all the wonderful things you've said, and at the same time, stop being so worried about how old people are?
Wow, what a question.
Well, I'll direct it to Joe to start with, because in fact it was your comments about the workforce and the workforce of the future that made me think about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll try and offer some reflection. I sort of was picking up a little bit actually on Angela's comments, and Debbie sort of alluded to in terms of construction. I think I think there's a sort of broader shift, which is that we have lots of the advances have taken place in particular domains, particular disciplines, in particular sectors. And I think we've almost, in some areas, kind of sort of got to a point where we've saturated. There isn't much in a particular domain that we can get further. And so my argument really is that actually we have legacy mindsets And so we think in physicists, we're in the Institute of Physics, we think of, construction. These grand challenges make us look up, make us think, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't climate change. If you are in Aberdeen today, climate change is hitting your building, your trees, your roads at 80 or 90 or 100 miles an hour. To tackle that isn't just we need stronger walls, bigger sea defences, higher probably platforms to sort of manage the lake above the train line. We need multifaceted responses. And I think to then get to this age point is that we need to think about the talent we bring in lots of much more creative and dynamic ways, because traditionally we have those domains are very hierarchical, junior, medium, middle managers, senior managers, one of the things I think the tech world has done has thrown lots of this up. We don't work in kind of waterfall project management approaches where you are the domain expert. Actually, the domain experts are your customers, your users, and actually an iterative process says that you develop. I think that then empowers young people, old people, and the brilliant one actually just on the aging society piece is we do all this work on hospitals of the future, and yet don't very rarely talk to the people who will be using hospitals of the future. So and that could actually be young people as well as old people. And so actually that user-centered design part, and that comes back to my kind of bit about collaboration skills, the ability to listen, the ability to kind of talk, ask questions, are really important skills. But we sort of beat them out of people at certain universities. We kind of go, you've got to be an expert. And so I think encouraging sort of primary school mentality where there are no daft questions is, I think, something that we should all be championing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really interesting what you say, actually. Just thinking back to my own institution at Nottingham, we've got technicians working, in their mid-70s at the moment. Actually, that's in physics, actually. But I don't think what we're very good at, I don't just mean Nottingham, I mean generally as a sector, is succession planning, particularly in technical roles across the board. So, for example, that physics department, I know that they haven't got an apprenticeship scheme, running this year, yet they're begging my colleague who's 75 to stay on for one more year, because they don't want to lose this expertise. And I think there's a lot of work we need to try and still unlock, despite the success of the technician commitment, in encouraging institutions to think more strategically around succession planning, particularly for those almost hidden technical skills that are so essential for them to do.
Yes, thank you.
So I think we all need to challenge ourselves, and so I reflect on it, and I'm sort of like, we create our own myths. I find it really difficult how we think about things in such discrete segments, whether that be about personal characteristics, about qualification levels, or about whether, we heard earlier, about how you get into the civil service. Every time we recruit, we define something that makes it unachievable to somebody. So I was reflecting with somebody recently on why do we always say we have to have PhDs? And the general response is because I've got one. And I'm not quite sure that's good enough anymore. UKRI has taken forward a fantastic project with the Innovation Research Caucus about flexible level 8 provision. I think we really have to think about what we do actually need. Why do we need people who have come through a sector route? I think the work of qualifications and qualification bodies will help us understand more with technology developments, that there is so much in common across occupations, across sectors, that we don't need to just have these discrete pathways, and they do limit us. I think business will get on board with this faster, simply because when the evidence that we're seeing at the moment is businesses are challenged in being able to innovate because they can't recruit technicians. We know this is going on, and businesses will be the first to find those creative decisions, and we have to make sure we're a part of that. And so I challenge everybody, and this isn't even my role, but every time you put out a job description, look at what you're asking for, and how much of that is because we've always asked for it, compared to that being about what you actually need. We not only will have the most age-diverse workforce than ever, but we have young people coming through the system who are more multidisciplinary than ever. The Institutes of Technology have run this fantastic innovation challenge. And what's amazing about it is people just work together in teams. They don't sort of say, oh, are you a technician? Are you an engineer? And I think the only way we can change is by everybody challenging ourselves and our own institutions and organisations.
Thank you. Interesting. Can I invite questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yes, so I actually wanted to sort of follow up on some of the things you mentioned and I guess challenge you a little bit further. I work in recruitment of researchers and I work quite hard actually to educate employers across industries because I actually work across sectors and I also support researchers across disciplines. And actually what I'm seeing when it comes to recruitment is that very limited mindset on the employer side a lot of times. And a lot of times I have to have very lengthy conversations about actually educating them about how, for instance, a PhD student or someone who is just graduating with a specific PhD, how valuable they could be within a career that perhaps may not be necessarily thought of, that would be a good fit for someone with that specific background. So the way I see it is that I wonder what institutions that you all representing could do more about actually educating employers about having that a little bit more open-minded mindset when it comes to hiring.
Thank you. That's a really useful additional perspective for us. Can I invite other questions? Yes, please.
So Arthur Nicholas, Institute of Science and Technology. I'm focusing on Debbie because my question directed. So your innovation framework skills, and your network, the UK network you have, focused on innovation skills. Do you actually do anything with the commercialisation and entrepreneurship skills required to harness that innovation?
Yes, so we have some fantastic programmes already. Sorry, I'm just concentrating. So we've got iCure, which is about taking amazing ideas which are created in universities and commercialising them, and that's been a fantastically supported programme for people who want to do that. I would reflect on the fact that the scalability is probably one of the biggest barriers. Where we're going next, again working with UKRI and IFATE, is really getting into those entrepreneurial skills. So again, back to the National Science and Technology Council framework for STEM, it is absolutely about how do we support PhD students in generating those entrepreneurial skills as one thing that's been identified, but is only part that. So we will develop that, and I think that plays to your point about how we need to find common language. And I think for many businesses, again, if I've never been through a PhD route, I don't accept the value of it because it's not familiar to me. So how do we do that language barrier? So we will now generate next this entrepreneurial framework to support the same people.
So I suppose the second question, do you envisage those entrepreneurial skills being in the same place as I was a career scientist, so I've never been an entrepreneur, I've never been an entrepreneur. Do you consider those being in the same set, or are they two things you bring together, or a mixture of both?
So when we started talking about the entrepreneurial skills framework, I was sort of like, can we not publish this one? Because somebody next will say, can we have a commercialisation one? I can guarantee. I think we've got
that was on the list.
Yeah, we've got this. We will create like a matrix, a Venn diagram, or whatever. There will be some things. So I'm not an entrepreneur, and I know my risk appetite is so minimal. So I think we'll see different almost pillars of each of them, which are unique to what we need in that skill set. But I think there'll be a commonality. But I'm not allowed to do this because I'm predicting what it might look like without us having done the work.
I'm going to offer a reflection from my kind of old days in education policy, because I think the other challenge, Debbie's kind of alluded to this, which is, and it's a heart of your question about these kind of two worlds. If you think about many, at the PhD end of the sort of spectrum for a moment, there's a sort of, one of the challenges is that you are on a career path. Once you sort of effectively do masters to master's PhD with the hope of becoming a bit like your supervisor, the next PI, the next Uber super god, I think what Ottiline is trying to do actually with a lot of her work at UKRI is to sort of challenge the sort of pedestal we put, because actually the problem then is everybody wants to become the next, Patrick Balance, and there aren't many Patrick Balances of this world or other PIs, and so part of the but anything that isn't that is then deemed a failure. So if you end up as a technician, if you end up in industry, all of this becomes a failure. But then if I go back to my education policy, the challenge then is you sort of go, oh, here's the other things that you could win. Have you thought about setting up a business? I don't want to do that. I want to be Patrick Balance. And so I think part of it is mainstreaming the alternative routes and actually the viability of, and one of the things I often get asked by UUK to sort of speak at type of events like this, and so I am not going to talk about your transferable skills as a PhD student, right? I'm going to say that actually an advanced knowledge economy needs brilliant researchers doing brilliant research, science and other, in all sorts of places, universities, businesses, local authorities. And so I think part of that is then equipping. What you don't want to do is ask lots of people to sort of try and layer on lots of it, but just make all of these routes more normalised by then exposure and other things. Because the danger is you just end up, have you done the enterprise module?
Thank you. That's correct. Question from the gentleman at the back.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of just agree with it and then add a quick question, which is this, because Life works in this translation space where you, for example, setting up a spin out and you need lots of different people, lots of different skills. And one of people's answers to this is let's teach academics how to do it. Let's teach them how to set up spin outs. And I think in many cases that might be fine, but there is another option, which is let's bring entrepreneurs in with academics and let's teach them how to be in a team together, and actually might save a lot of time and energy and money if they can see the value in each other. So I guess my question is, for something like that innovation skills framework, which looks fantastic, is there provision to say that not all of those skills need to come from the same person, and actually let's build a team science approach where we need to make sure we've got these skills covered off, but it doesn't always have to be in one person?
But you're going to just nod to that.
I would nod, but I'd also say academics, entrepreneurs, and technicians.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Don't forget that technicians are innovators, absolutely, every day. In fact, we've been working with the BVSLC on ICURE to expand that programme, of course, to PhD students, but to technical staff as well, so they can recognise when they're doing innovation in their roles. So sorry, but yeah.
And I think one of the things, and it is early days, and to sort of save Debbie, I'm going to say this, one of the great additions to the system is UK research and innovation. It's an organisation that should, at least on paper, bring together research, innovation, the technicians, the PhD students, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the commercialisers, the translators, the catapult. This should be a very broad church, because it is a very broad church, and these.
Anna Sheridan, Royal Society of Chemistry. So I suppose themes so far from today feel like we're going to need a workforce that's able to learn and continuously learn, to adapt to a hell of a lot of change, and also we want it to be more diverse. Now, one of my big takeaways from skills panels at the Labour Party conference last week was that where we're trying to reach out to often lower socio-economic groups, they're not interested in green jobs, novel jobs, any other jobs that feel like they're quite insecure. So how do we square the circle? How do we communicate the idea of a good future career that will involve that change, that will involve that uncertainty and that continuous learning, to people who come from a background where there probably isn't the financial security to take risks?
I think there's the initial thing about what are we talking to them about, because I think we have a habit. One of my greatest frustrations is we keep on going in and talking to young people about really, really distinctive careers and sectors and needs. And as you said, for a lot of young people, it's just about the certainty of employment. So it's about finding the route that works for them, rather than sort of almost complicating the space beyond the needs that they need to be met in the here and now. We were at the Swindon Wiltshire Institute of Technology last week, and things I don't appreciate in life is that when you come from a family whose parents have got a job based on level 2 skills, you're creating that perception that you just need level 2 skills to get on. How do you create that sense of ambition? You give them things where they need them rather than asking them to go to them. So I think we should not underestimate our young people, but I think we should definitely challenge our accepted norms when we're presenting it to them. I think we have such a fantastic range of technical education now, as well as through colleges and universities, but make it how that person wants it rather than us complicating a system for them to fit into.
Hosted an event just a couple of weeks ago called Text Fest. We put an X in because apparently that made it cooler to kids. It was for year 9 and 10 students. We had almost 700 school children at Derby Arena, mainly from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. It wasn't a careers fair, it was more of a technical careers showcase. So there was robot dogs, there was real dogs, we were doing ultrasounds on, there was flying sharks, there was drones. We engaged them with all these different fun activities, and there were so many different ways they could provide feedback, but just the little cards that the students filled in as they left, they're like, oh, I didn't know this sort of thing that was behind the scenes that you could work on to be a technician, and oh, I'm going to go and learn about T-levels now, or I want to be a technician now. And I just think engaging them in different imaginative ways really helps.
Thank you. 2 questions at the back. Can you go in either order?
Mine's a comment on that.
Go on then.
Yeah, okay.
That's all right.
Stacey Carmichael from BBC Children in Need. I guess I'm here representing the youth workspace, so I wanted to comment on that. We've just completed a £2.5 million match-funded program with Children in Need and the Wellcome Trust, looking at how STEM impacts young people in informal spaces. And I think one of the things that I'm here to think about is that intersectionality between social, emotional, and STEM skills, because what has actually come out of that research is, yes, STEM skills development, but it's also around young people's mental well-being and their resilience, their sort of built up resilience because of this programming. And so I think one of the things that we thought about when we were going into it, youth workers aren't natural sort of STEM teachers necessarily. They come from an informal space rather than the formal sort of schools space. But as they got into it, they realized that by engaging young people in this kind of programming, it broke down barriers that young people have had with STEM previously in some of those formal spaces. So I think just that intersectionality between STEM skills development and social emotional is something we should be thinking about.
Thank you.
Just one quick reflection just back. I also think there's what seems to have dissipated a little bit is there was quite a lot before the pandemic of kind of Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y. And part of the question, which was, Tanya's question about whether or not, this is something that, the Labour Party didn't really get into last week, is actually what we're also seeing is for a lot of younger generations coming into the workforce, they want to do jobs that they feel will make a difference and have an impact, and not have a negative impact on the world, or be a more inclusive. So I sort of think, I wonder if there will also become a sort of, we are sometimes looking at this through older lenses of whether or not actually the demand will come from people who want to do jobs that will not have an impact, negative impact on the world.
Thank you.
Hi, Seb Hargreaves, the Operational Research Society. I'm just interested in your thoughts on how the network of professional bodies and learned societies need to respond and evolve against the context of what you said around workforce skill sets having to be a lot more broad, people often changing careers more readily, etc. Given that, historically or typically, professional bodies and learned societies often have quite a sort of prescriptive set of criteria around membership, can be quite vigorous in terms of what constitutes their particular area. And I'm just, bearing in mind, this is a Science Council event, and there's a network of Science Council members that are from professional bodies and learned societies. How do we need to respond to this evolving workforce skills landscape and some of the things that you've been talking about?
Oh, who would like to tackle that one? I'm not.
I will have to go because it's my provocations that have sort of stimulated this debate. So I got invited by a university sort of vice chancellor to come in and talk to their sort of senior council and board. And but he deliberately asked me to be provocative. And I said, okay, so oven-ready graduates in a world of microwaves was my opening stimulation. And okay, right, Joe's going on one. But my at the heart of it was actually trying to get into this kind of agile methodology thinking. How do you move away from the domain expert knowledge that we equip university graduates with? You are a physicist, you are a biologist, and then the quality of your brilliance first. And I sort of said, actually, what do you do? And I said, well, in many ways, you can't change your lecturing, because actually many of the learning societies and professional bodies almost regulate those domain knowledge expertise that, in order to be recognised, chartered, etc. But I said, the way you teach, the way you use your seminars to shift it from questioning into listening skills. And I got this brilliant debate going between the dean of the business school, who was like, oh, that's really interesting, and the dean of the health sciences. And the dean of health sciences said, our nurses are brilliant at listening to patients, because patients present, this itches, that hurts, that feels broken. And a nurse will kind of go, how much did you drink last night? Where were you? Oh, it's Thursday morning. Were you out last night in town? That bump is from that pavement. That, let's not talk about the itch, but we will talk about the graze and the headache is because of the number of pints you had, right? But actually another presents with exactly the same sets of symptoms, and the ability of a nurse to listen and go, hang on a minute, 1, 2, 3, actually let's get you to A&E and test you out properly. But that ability to shift from I know I'm the expert to actually the questioning skills. So I offer that in the sense that that's what that kind of collaboration bit is. And I think to sort of pay testimony to the work that Kelly is doing with the Institute, if you look at the list of organisations listed that are collaborating, it's not that Midlands Innovation, Nottingham could do this on their own. It will be better, stronger by collaborations. And I think for the learned societies, the national academies, the ability to have that self-confidence to be genuinely collaborative with other organisations, because you will still need chemistry and physiology and other domain expertise, but it's your ability to apply it that becomes really important.
Can I say something to that, Dennis?
Yes,
okay.
of course.
I think the advent of professional registration, the registers at our SciTech and our Sci have been really helpful for, I guess, in terms of professional organisations being more inclusive, rather than just recognising, as you mentioned, esteem, elite, professionals up there. I mean, to be honest, I would say that professional bodies have only really started engaging with the technical workforce, for example, in the last decade, since those new registers were added in 2012, despite these organisations sometimes being nearly 200 years old, only just started to engage with, the whole workforce, if that makes sense. And I think that bodes well.
Thank you. I think also stepping out of my role of chair, responding to Seb, I think I've done an awful lot of work on interprofessional collaboration. And I think, yes, we do need people to collaborate really, really well, but they have to have something to bring to the party. There has to be something that the rest of the team needs from them and values from them. So the professions and the disciplines do still have a role, because they are the thing that people are bringing to the party. Somebody thinks like a mathematician, or somebody thinks like a behavioural scientist, and together they do really interesting things. And so there is a necessity for some separateness in order to have togetherness that is actually fruitful and productive. And so I think to some extent that speaks also to your question about disciplines. I'm going to round it up now, because I heard,
Quickly, yes. Sorry, sorry, I don't mean to stop you from rounding up. I did have a question about something that's quite different. I'm Sian Davies-Solomon. I'm from the University of Northampton, but I also am representing Geological Society. Debbie, you mentioned work with IFATE and degree apprenticeships, and I'm interested to know the role of degree apprenticeships in this space and how they may need to evolve or not to meet these workforce skills gaps. I know that's quite a big question, but I've been waiting to see if apprenticeships had come up.
No, but I was reflecting on the question earlier about how do we work with young people, and so for me, apprenticeship should be everything that we're doing. And again, I'll ask, I don't know the answer, where do apprenticeships fit in with professional institutions and learned societies? If we, I've got so many examples, but some people don't want to leave home. Do you know what I mean? Some people can't go to university in the places where we think people should go to universities. Apprenticeships not only enable social mobility, but they allow people to realise their ambition. So I think, and I'd say, I wonder where apprenticeships are in all of your organisations today. I also wonder where they are in my own every day. But I think, again, I'm just back to there's so much we can do, but apprenticeships should be not the alternative option. They should be, which one do you want to do? And yes, so sorry, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think they should just be everything to us.
Thank you. So I know that apprenticeships are actually a really big thing in lots of the organisations that are in this room. So maybe when we're having our tea, that I did hear clatter in a few minutes ago, people can converge and talk about apprenticeships, because we've got some fabulous examples of them. I do want to keep us to time today, so I need to thank Debbie and Joe and Kelly for their presentations and the audience for their attention and their questions. Tea is in the atrium just outside, and then afterwards we're going to break into two groups. So one group will be back in here, and the other workshop group will be on the third floor. So if you have a look in your programme, you'll see where it is that your particular session will go on. Thank you very much.